Have you ever wondered what everyday photography was like before we had digital cameras and before all the advanced settings and sensors that we have now? Today we're checking out a camera that literally introduced millions of people to everyday photography. The Kodak Duaflex II. This little box camera was designed to be affordable and insanely easy to use for everyday families. And even though it's an extremely simple camera compared to today's cameras, the Duaflex II represents an important chapter in the history of photography. So today we're checking out the history of the Kodak Duaflex II, talk about how it works with a few surprising adjustable settings, and talk about why these types of cameras still seem to be everywhere today. Welcome to the bright side. But to fully understand the Kodak Duaflex II, we first have to go back to the late 1940s. Following World War II, photography was quickly becoming popular among everyday consumers. Families wanted affordable cameras to document vacations, holidays, and everyday life. Kodak noticed this growing demand and began producing cameras that were both super cheap and surprisingly simple enough for almost anyone to use. Kodak introduced the original Duaflex camera in 1947 and released the Duaflex II in 1950. This camera was produced between 1950 and 1954 and quickly became Kodak's most successful entry-level camera. At the time, Kodak's business model was simply, you press the button, we do the rest. Basically putting Kodak well ahead of the game when it came to anything remotely close to being a point-and-shoot camera. The company wanted photography to be super easy and approachable, instead of requiring users to fully understand complicated exposure settings or fragile lens adjustments. For many families in the 50s, a Duaflex II was probably their first camera. Now, one of the most interesting things about the Duaflex II is the design. This thing kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. It looks similar to a twin lens reflex camera, but instead, the Duaflex is a pseudo TLR camera. The biggest difference between the Duaflex and true TLR cameras is the Duaflex II doesn't have a moving reflex mirror system. Instead, Kodak created a much simpler viewing arrangement to keep costs low. This means the viewfinder is only used for framing, and the fixed lens doesn't allow for any focus adjustments, making the user rely on depth of field and zone focusing. When you look down into the viewfinder from above, you'll see a small image of your subject. Even back then, this was still a unique experience compared to eye-level cameras and gave users a different way of composing their shots. For many photographers still today, using a waist-level viewfinder remains still one of the most enjoyable aspects of shooting with vintage cameras. Talking about some of the key features of this camera, the Duaflex II typically came equipped with the Kodak meniscus lens. This was a very simple lens design specifically geared toward casual photography. While it wasn't designed for professional image quality, it was still more than capable as a family's everyday camera. The shutter was also simplified to a rotary shutter, meaning you don't have the ability to adjust shutter speed. While this may make the Duaflex II seem extremely limited, which it is, Kodak gave the camera a few modes that still widened the range of use for photographers. The first being instant exposure mode, which would be used for everyday photography, basically treating the camera like a point and shoot without having to adjust any settings. Time exposure mode, however, allowed the shutter to remain open as long as the shutter button was held down, making longer exposures possible with no extra steps. At that point, it's just up to the user to determine how long the shutter should stay open. Also, side note, the mechanical shutter in this just sounds super cool. Now, to be totally honest with you guys, I can't actually shoot with this camera. Not because the shutter is jammed or that there's too much light leak or anything like that. I honestly don't know if it does or does not, but I can't use the Duaflex II because it takes 620 film. Now, if you've never heard of 620 film before, it's because Kodak discontinued it many decades ago. It's essentially the same width as 120 film, but it uses a different spool design. A workaround for this that many photographers actually do is to respool 120 film onto 620 spools. But let's be real, ain't nobody got time for that.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
This camera produced 6x6 centimeter square negatives, giving photographers 12 medium format exposures per roll. And even with the simple lens, the large negative size can produce beautiful images with plenty of detail. The Duaflex II was built with a combination of metal and hard plastic components. This helped keep manufacturing costs low while still creating a durable and a really good looking camera. Many examples have survived more than 70 years and remain fully functional today, which is insane and pretty impressive that there's still a group of photographers out there that still use these cameras regularly. So what would it actually be like using a Kodak Duaflex II today? First, it's definitely a slower experience than modern photography. There's no batteries, no autofocus, no IBIS, no screen, no modern amenities whatsoever that we've become so dependent on with modern cameras. You'd need to estimate your exposure based on lighting conditions and work alongside with the camera's fixed settings. Sourcing the film is obviously a pretty big hurdle, especially with the original 620 format, but that's kind of part of the appeal. Many photographers enjoy the slower pace and unpredictability of vintage cameras. Every photograph feels more meaningful because each frame costs money, time, and effort to make. The large square negatives can produce images with a distinctive vintage character to them that is difficult to replicate with digital cameras. And honestly, there's just something satisfying about a camera that has survived for more than 70 years and people still use today. You're probably looking at this camera thinking, okay, it's well over 50 years old. You can't get the film for it anymore. It looks really cool. I'm sure it costs a boatload of money. But the good news for collectors is that the Kodak Duaflex II remains relatively affordable. Unlike some vintage cameras that sell for hundreds or even thousands of dollars, the Duaflex II can still be found pretty much anywhere, from antique stores to flea markets to estate sales to online marketplaces, for surprisingly cheap prices. And usually you can find one for between $15 and $75 depending on condition. And because so many of these cameras were produced, they're not exactly rare, but they are extremely historically significant. The Kodak Duaflex II may not be the most advanced camera ever made. In fact, by modern standards, it's incredibly simple, but that's exactly what makes it special. This camera helped bring photography into homes all across America and gave ordinary people the ability to document their lives on their own. Whether you're a camera collector or a film photography enthusiast or someone who appreciates vintage photography and technology as a whole, the Duaflex II offers a glimpse into a time when photography was slower, more intentional, and perhaps a little more magical. Thank you very much for sticking around to the end of this video. If you haven't already, please subscribe, like, and comment down below if you have any memories about the Kodak Duaflex II. Maybe one of your family members had one of these cameras from back in the day, or maybe you actually shot with this camera before. If so, comment down below what your experience with this camera was. And of course, if I missed any fun tidbits about the Duaflex II or the original Duaflex, feel free to comment down below and inform people. I at least enjoy learning some pretty weird facts about old stuff anyway. Stay tuned for some more old camera history and reviews and other camera review type videos, because for some reason I have a stack of old cameras that I need to figure out what to do with. But until next time, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we'll see you in the next one. Deuces, everybody.